Welcome to Stories and Songs, a series of interviews featuring inspirational musicians from the world of jazz and improvisation. My name is Andrea Keller and I'm thrilled to be talking to Dr. Sandy Evans today, wonderful saxophonist, composer and educator. Welcome, Sandy.
Thank you, Andrea. It's a great pleasure and a privilege to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Oh, absolutely. Well, I have three questions for you today. The first question is, what have been the pivotal events in your musical journey?
So, my very first memory of music is sitting in the backyard as a little girl. The sun's shining. I'm in a beautiful garden and I'm making up songs. And it's associated with happiness and just bliss and joy. And it's actually my earliest memory. That was the one that came before I pulled the iron down on my arm and burnt my arm and had to go to hospital. So it's much more pleasant. And then I was very lucky. My mother is a pianist and she sort of taught me some piano and to read music. This was before I went to school. So I think that was very, very pivotal, because I from as early as I can remember, music was a fun thing, it was a creative thing, it was something you did yourself to express how you felt. Then the next thing that I thought of that was probably incredibly important was sneaking out of boarding school in Singapore. I finished high school there and I had a duo with a guitarist and we used to do gigs in hotel lobbies. And of course, I wasn't allowed to go and do that. So I had to sneak out. It was quite an adventure because I had to climb over a big barbed wire fence. There were guards patrolling the fence. I had to jump a monsoon drain. And so that was pretty pivotal, actually. And it was a lot of fun. And I didn't really know what I was doing in terms of improvising. I was he was much more experienced than me, the guitarist, and it was sort of jazz lounge music with a bit of pop thrown in. It was in the disco era, so there's a lot of disco vibe happening around the hotels as well. It was a lot of fun. And but yeah, I think that's when I first sort of really established this identity as a professional musician of some sort, and it just happened to tie in with this rather exciting adventure of sneaking out of boarding school. Then, I went to the Conservatorium in Sydney and studied jazz there. And thinking about that led me to think probably really important in my journey has been some of the musical mentors that I've had. Leading into going to that course, I was incredibly well supported by Tony Buchanan, who was my saxophone teacher at the time, and also Bruce Cale, the bass player and composer, who taught me about the Lydian chromatic concept. He'd studied with George Russell and he taught me about that and just really, inspired me about how to approach improvisation, told me all sorts of stories about musicians he'd worked with in America and all that sort of thing. Then at the Conservatorium, Roger Frampton was a great mentor to me, and that was very important, as was Paul McNamara and also Don Burrows. The list goes on and on and on, so it's a bit too long to mention everyone. Sorry about that, everyone out there. But others who I think probably really important is Tony Gorman, who I'm married to, and I'm fortunate to have, a musical family around me. I think that's been very pivotal in my development. Adrian Sheriff, Melbourne person that you're probably all familiar with, and he's mentored me a great deal, particularly in intercultural music, but also in all sorts of other ways. John Poche, drummer and band leader of 10 Part Invention, Paul Grabowski from the Australian Art Orchestra, Lloyd Swanton from the Catholics, and Guru Karakudi Mani, who has led my interest in finding out more about South Indian music. So those were the sort of some of the important mentors. Like I say, there's many, many more. Next pivotal activity, I had a band called Women and Children First. This was not long after I finished at the Conservatorium. I loved playing with that band and I went, okay, that's what I want to do. I want to play music every night of the week. How can I do that? We'll buy a bus. we'll drive around Australia and we'll play everywhere. So we did buy a bus and we camped in all sorts of places in outback Australia. We went on this 7-month kind of huge epic journey around the country. And that was an incredible experience. Um, After that, I went to overseas, and I that was also incredibly important to live and play and study both in Europe and in New York. And I think that seeing some really great bands playing was very, very important. You know, it just sort of made me go, oh, wow, that's what it's all about. And then also having the chance to, you know, play at some big festivals and to study with people like Joe Lovano and Dave Liebman, you know, they're really significant experiences that, you know, have definitely stuck with me and shaped me a lot. Um, Another important sort of pivotal moment for me was I mentioned Guru Karakudi Mani, and for me, learning about some of the approaches, particularly to rhythm in South Indian music, has been very significant in terms of helping me develop my own confidence and vocabulary as an improviser. So I'd say that was quite pivotal as well. Um, Also, um, interacting with so many significant and powerful women in music has been very pivotal for me. And that goes back to my early days as a musician, where when I was at the Conservatorium in Sydney, I actually lived with another saxophone player, Diane Spence, who was doing the jazz course with me. And having a sort of companion there who was female was really, really helpful. And then working in bands, you know, through the Melbourne Women's Festival, which was probably the first time I played with you, I think,
Mm.
Andrea. You know, for me, that was just so wonderful because I felt a lot less isolated and to sort of realize that what a beautiful and supportive and creative thing it was to make music with other women was has been very special, and that continues to be an important thing for me. And it led to me, you know, trying to run some programs to encourage more women to engage with jazz and improvised music, and seeing how that is blossoming slowly, perhaps, sometimes quickly, but it's very, very rewarding to see that. And it gives me a great deal of encouragement as well to go on with my own development. There's a lot of other things, but maybe that's enough for now.
It sounds like such an exciting life and such a rich life of creativity and travel and meeting people and how wonderful. I can't wait for us to research more about the fabulous things you've done. Could you tell us what obstacles you may have had to overcome during your musical life and how have you dealt with them?
Well, it's a bit of a cliche, but I'm my own worst enemy. And I think the biggest obstacle is lack of self confidence and lack of belief. Um, so when I was young, that was quite a problem for me. I would come away from doing a gig and I would just feel like I was the worst musician in the world, and I would be very, very upset about that. Um, I thankfully I had some good friends who helped me to build my confidence and also to accept that I'm not perfect. I think that's a huge thing to learn is you are who you are, embrace that and celebrate that, work to build your strengths, but don't condemn yourself for not fulfilling all your expectations every time you play. So, like I say, I had a couple of close friends who really helped me to realize that I wasn't a terrible person if I didn't play the solo I was hoping to play. and that I might play it next time or in 10 years' time or whenever. But maintaining that goal, that aspiration was important. But yeah, so I would say that's a big obstacle. It never goes away, to be honest. But I think you learn how to deal with it, and you learn to, just to be happier with, or at least I have, to be happier with who I am and what I might be able to bring to the musical community. Um, I think tied in with that is, particularly when I was younger, not having any role models that I associated with. I can remember a particular moment. I guess I was about 18 or 19, and it was before I went to the conservatorium, but after I'd finished high school. And I was sort of a little bit lost and searching around, thinking, um, I want to do this jazz and improvised music thing, but I don't know if I can. And I remember standing on a beach near where I live. I live on the northern beaches in Sydney, and this was down at Freshwater Beach one night, and I can still picture it, where it sort of dawned on me. I'm what? I'm a woman. I'm Australian. All these things seem to be different from John Coltrane. And, that particular moment was like, okay, hang on a minute. Who am I within this big picture? Um, and somehow or other, just even recognizing that and going, okay, so John Coltrane is incredible. He's one of my, heroes and one of big people who's really motivated me as a musician, as a saxophone player. But I'm not him. But that's okay too. I still have things that I can bring to the music, and I can still honor John Coltrane in my own way. So yeah, I think that was an obstacle. I'm seeing now more and more role models, within jazz for young women, and a diversity of role models as well, in terms of ethnicity and age group and genders and all sorts of things. And I think that's just brilliant. That's really sort of changing the landscape for everybody, including guys. It's everybody seems to be really benefiting from that, and I think that's a fantastic thing. And then I'd say the other obstacle is one that probably applies right across the board to anyone in the creative arts, really. And that's the difficulty of sustaining a career. It's hard. It's not much money. You have to just think about how am I going to make a living, and you have to be comfortable with the choices that you make. I've been very fortunate to have the amazing support from my family, but not everyone has that. And so, even with that, it's certainly not easy to see how to proceed with a career in music. And I think what's hard is you complete something like, say, that tour I was talking about, of Women and Children First around Australia. You put everything into it and you think, okay, well, that's gonna be it now. It'll just kind of keep on chugging over itself. But actually you have to keep driving it the whole time. And yeah, of course things come to you. It's not like it's all for nothing and you're always back at square one. But I think just maintaining that energy in a society where, in my opinion, there's not enough support for the arts, I think that's a really big challenge that we all share and we all have to support each other with.
Yes, I really agree with you there, Sandy. And that it's a great point, just how you never sort of create something that is enough and then you can just live off it for a while. It's sort of like you have to continually be reinventing and coming up with new things, as a way
Yes,
of generating more work and more experiences. And yeah.
yes. And as in music, in life in general, I would just like to say what a huge inspiration you are in all these matters, Andrea. And when I'm about role models, I mean, you're I'm older than you, but you're a great role model for us all. And, I think the significance of that is huge. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandy. That means a lot because you have been an incredible mentor to me and role model since before I met you, well before I met you, growing up in Sydney and seeing you there. You were always sort of someone that I really admired really greatly, and you were leading the
Oh,
way there.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The final question is, do you have a personal philosophy that guides you, or would you like to share some advice with our audience?
Yeah, so the first thing is don't give up. As long as you keep it going, you will improve and you will find fulfillment and you will be able to connect with the creativity within and you will be able to communicate that to other people. So there's this constant sort of loop between finding what's in your soul, figuring out how to express it, giving it to the world, and then the world will give back to you. And that is a really, really deep and beautiful and meaningful thing. And I think it overrides a lot of the difficulties that you will inevitably face. So as long as you just keep the faith, as it were, you know, and you need to be disciplined. You definitely require, a life as a musician requires that. And you need to be consistent with that discipline. Whether it's, with your individual practice, with it's developing your bands, developing your ideas, whether it's the business side of things, all these things you need to be disciplined with. You need to be flexible. So what worked for you last year might not work this year, especially this year. And may I take a moment just to wish everybody in Melbourne the very, very best with, what's really an incredible time. Um, but I'm totally confident that every one of us has within us what we need to continue as creative artists through this time, and that more than ever, our creativity and the music that we can make to heal, to connect, to uplift, inspire is central to our happiness and to our mental well-being and to our sense of community. So don't give up on that belief and don't give up on, also, I think, when times are tough, it's easy to get down. Know that things go in cycles and that things will change and they will become easier again and that more possibilities will happen. So that's what I mean by not giving up. Um, and I would also um, just encourage you to support your friends and your peers. For me, I think probably above everything else, the support of people in the bands that I've played in and that I have the privilege to interact with as a musician in various ways um, is so profound. The connections that we make with each other are just beautiful. And so do your best to support your peers and your friends and even people you don't like, or people you have problems with. We're all struggling, there's always a reason why somebody's, doesn't behave or play the way you would like them to in a band, or outside of the band. So yeah, try to be, sympathetic with that and understanding. But I think this community that we have as musicians is it just knocks me out, actually. I can't even find the words to express, how important my friendships that I've made through music are. And that's what I would, really encourage you to do is to talk to each other. Don't be scared to sort of, be honest, ask for help if you need it. And people will help you. And just enjoy that. The final thing I would say is I mentioned at the start of the interview that I have struggled with self-confidence and that got in the way of my enjoyment of music when I was younger. Um, and you may go through that. I'm not saying you will, but you might. Don't worry. But I'm almost going to quote the Bob McFerrin song. You know, do be happy. Um, Enjoy the sound that you're making. Enjoy the sound that you're making individually and collectively. Um, Music is about joy. It can be sad joy, it can be ugly joy, it can be beautiful joy, but it is about that. It's about affirming our humanity and our love of life. It's a very special and precious thing, and do your best to enjoy that and not to ever waste an opportunity to enjoy that.
Wonderfully said. Thank you, Sandy. Um, if you don't mind, just before we go, if you could nominate a song or an album of yours that is particularly significant to you, and maybe just tell us really briefly about why it might be so important so that we can go and explore that music for ourselves.
Thanks for that invitation. So I've chosen a song from the band Clarion Fracture Zone. So Clarion Fracture Zone was a group that I co-led with Alistair Spence and Tony Gorman. It was a quintet, and it was a really important in my development. Um, and I've chosen a song called Feather Star that's from our first CD. Or actually, I'm showing my age here because it was released as a LP, a cassette, and a CD. So it was right at that, sort of a transition time in terms of technology. So yeah, the album was called Blue Shift. And um, first of all, the whole album was kind of themed around environmental activism, but back in the late 1980s. Um, I'd come back from living in Europe, and as I mentioned earlier, I live by the beach, and the beach and the ocean is, really important to me. And there was a lot of pollution happening on the beaches in Sydney at that time due to the way the sewage was working here. And so there was some activism around that. And our first project with Clarion Fracture Zone was called Music for the Southern Seas. We did a concert at the Bondi Pavilion, and it was all sort of themed around that. Anyway, Feather Star is a kind of a starfish, um, and beautiful little creature. Um, so I love these sea creatures. And musically, for me, this was the first time that I'd recorded a piece that I could listen to. So before that, I'd made recordings, and actually now I can listen to them, but I couldn't then because I just could hear all the holes in it. And this one, when after I recorded it, I didn't sort of grimace. I went, oh, okay, that's quite nice. And I quite like the composition. It's sort of just got a little simple kind of motif in 5/8, and then as I suppose it's kind of Wayne Shorter inspired harmony. Nice, slightly polytonal chords over moving bass notes. And it also, another thing we did with that band, we were trying to play acoustic jazz, but with samples and synthesizer. So it also has some of that. It's got a pad though, like a pad sound. It's not a sampled sound. But this was like something we're really interested in that has sort of been picked up again now. How much further are we on? 30 years on. But at that time, the technology wasn't quite, well, anywhere near as advanced as it is now. So it was quite sort of groundbreaking to sort of introducing some of these acoustic elements, not in a fusion context, but more within a jazz context. So the aesthetics of all of that I quite enjoyed about this track as well, and of course the wonderful band. So it's Tony Gorman on tenor saxophone, me on tenor saxophone, Alice Spence on keyboards, Steve Elphick on bass, and Andrew Dickerson on the drums.
We can't wait to check it out further. Thank you so much for your time today, Sandy, and all your wonderful advice and your stories, and great admiration to you, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much, Andrea, and all the very best to anybody who's listening to this. I really wish you well with your musical journeys.